War in the Middle East. Russia's closest ally just lost most of its nuclear program and top military command, all in one strike. Russia's war losses in Ukraine have reached 1 million. How many more of his people is Putin willing to sacrifice just to stay in power? Operation Spiderweb 2. Ukraine isn't slowing down. After wrecking Russia's strategic bombers, our defenders have now taken out an entire military train full of armored vehicles. Ukraine unveils a new ballistic weapon and it's already heading into mass production. And it's not just Ukraine. Russia is preparing for attacks on NATO countries too. Hello and welcome. We are from Ukraine and I'm Viktor Kalatai. Let's catch you up on the biggest developments from Russia's war on Ukraine this past week. Buckle up, here we go. Middle East on fire. Let's break down what happened. On the night of June 13th, Israel launched airstrikes on Iran's capital Tehran and several other cities. They called it a preemptive strike targeting Iran's nuclear program and military leadership. And it worked, big time. Reports say Israel killed Hossein Salami, head of the IRGC, Gholam Ali Rashid, commander of the Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, Mohammad Bagheri, Iran chief of staff, and 6 nuclear scientists. Iran's military spokesperson, Brigadier General Sekharchi, threatened revenge not just against Israel but also the US, despite Washington claiming it had nothing to do with the strikes. That same evening, Iran launched about 150 ballistic missiles towards Israel. Then came round 2, another barrage overnight. Explosions rocked cities including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. One missile even hit a high-rise in downtown Tel Aviv. So much for diplomacy. Iran, the same country supplying Russia with those lovely Shahed drones, clearly isn't backing down. Israel, backed by the US, at least defensively, decided enough was enough and hit back. Here is hoping the US drops the double standards and starts treating Iran's BFF, the Russian Federation, the same way. Because peaceful initiatives clearly don't work on dictators. President Zelensky says it clearly. Trump can stop Putin. He believes Trump has the power and the responsibility to put an end to Russian aggression once and for all.
Trump can stop him. For this, Putin must lose money, and only in this way, losing money, he will not be able to increase the army and finance the military sector. And he will have internal issues. For this, sanctions must be introduced only in this way. And diplomatically, I do not know Trump can or cannot, but between us, Bita, he is the president of the United States, he must influence any aggressor in the world.
Speaking of power moves, Zelensky just confirmed Ukraine has launched mass production of its own ballistic missile. Details in the next segment.
At a time when Russian aggression continues unabated, Ukraine's long-range weaponry is becoming not only a symbol of strength, but also a real guarantee of security.
Our missile program has good momentum. And although this is a difficult task, we are gradually getting closer to being able to use our own missiles and not just rely on supplies from our partners. And not just rely on missiles supplied by our partners.
In 2025, there was a breakthrough in the production of Ukrainian missiles. The greatest anticipation was focused on the production of a domestic ballistic missile, and now it has happened.
I believe that the supervisors made a good choice, both in separating the program from other programs and in assigning each missile system and missile type its own supervisor and manager. This is a positive development. As far as I know, tests were conducted in mid-May, and they are considered to have been extremely successful. The missile traveled almost 300 kilometers and destroyed a Russian command post. And it is very important that this was a combat use.
A Ukrainian-made ballistic missile covered almost 300 kilometers and destroyed a Russian command post.
The warhead of this missile weighs over 400 kilograms, and that is a very powerful arsenal. For comparison, the new American ballistic missile has a warhead of only 91 kilograms. It's clear that this will be a powerful weapon for us. I hope that we will continue to move forward.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly said that the Ukrainian ballistic missile is already on the way.
I have instructed that separate funding be allocated to our Ukrainian ballistic program for faster missile production.
One of the versions currently circulating claims that the Ukrainian armed forces have already been attacking enemy targets with ballistic missiles for a year. After all, many experts and analysts have, from time to time, been unable to identify the weapon used to destroy enemy targets.
The first time successful results were announced was by the president, I believe, sometime in July or August of last year. And since then, there have been several instances when strikes on Russia were carried out. There is a suggestion that Ukrainian ballistic missiles were involved in these strikes on Russia.
A domestically produced ballistic missile is truly a breakthrough for the Ukrainian defense industrial complex.
Ukraine had been working on such projects even before the war began, and some of these projects were already at the stage of being almost ready, that is, at the prototype level, ready to be adopted into service. Since Ukraine needed to develop its own missile program, in this missile program, which essentially happened in 2023, all the projects that were in a more or less prepared, finished state were revived. And they were used to begin the development of Ukraine's own ballistic missile.
Some speculated that this referred to the Ukrainian ballistic missile of the Sapsan complex, which the president of Ukraine mentioned last year.
Nowhere is it stated what kind of missile this is, what it will be called, or its specifications. In fact, it's more likely that the internal components have been modernized, rather than the appearance internals, rather than the exterior. And now all the necessary organization and management structures have been established to actively move this project forward.
After successful testing, the Ukrainian ballistic missile and tactical complex is expected to go into mass production.
The optimal option would be a missile with a range of up to 712, around 700 kilometers, and a warhead equipped with a good guidance system, ensuring high accuracy in the payload of at least 200 kilograms. Of course, if it's more, that would be even better.
This would allow us to deliver serious strikes against the entire military-industrial complex of the enemy.
A missile with a range of 300 kilometers and a 400-kilogram warhead, as stated in the specifications for this missile, will allow us to destroy targets at the operational tactical depths. This is also very good because, in fact, all command and control, all military logistics, all depots, they are located in this zone.
Ukraine has already made attempts to develop a ballistic missile over the past 30 years. At that time, domestic capabilities were limited by the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty.
Everyone remembers that when Oreshnik appeared, we learned about the existence of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. What was it about? It was about the fact that the country, specifically the parties to this treaty, which are Russia and the United States, do not engage in the development of intermediate range missiles. And an intermediate range missile, meaning a ballistic missile, is defined as having a range from 500 to 5,500 kilometers. And when Trump, while he was president, first learned from intelligence that the Russians were developing the RS-26 missile with a range of less than 5,500 kilometers, he broke off, he withdrew from this treaty, and then Russia also withdrew from this treaty.
A country undertakes the obligation to produce missiles with a range of no more than 500 kilometers, but only for domestic use.
If they produce them for export, then the range must not exceed 300 kilometers. So I think that the Ukrainian development of this ballistic missile is currently within the framework of export restrictions, but I am almost certain that its range will be increased to 500 kilometers.
The Ukrainian defense industrial complex is making successful progress in developing weaponry.
I think it will evolve towards a range of 500 kilometers. Perhaps the warhead might be slightly reduced, but I believe that most likely even without reducing the warhead.
Ukraine's missile program is a strategic factor in the country's security. This is a breakthrough and a trump card in the hands of a country defending itself against Putin and his military machine. The development and production of Ukrainian missiles will allow the country to independently address the destruction of Russia's military capabilities in its aggressive war against Ukraine.
And if you missed it, another epic hit by Ukrainian forces, 13 tanks and over 100 armored vehicles destroyed in one swoop. That's one train Russia won't be getting back.
Web 2 versus Russian military equipment and railway logistics. That's exactly how the new operation by the Ukrainian armed forces was dubbed in Z channels.
Obvious and unthinkable for our intelligence services. There's no point in staying silent anymore. The enemy destroyed a locomotive carrying tanks and dozens of armored vehicles. The adversary destroyed most of the equipment without any resistance. Operation Web 2. Someone has to be held accountable for this.
And now, if they want to, a small group of saboteurs is capable of disabling entire aviation units. All it takes is to approach and launch a certain number of drones. Air defense, let's put it this way, can't cope with an organized swarm of drones.
The defense forces of southern Ukraine destroyed a huge column of Russian military equipment by attacking a train transporting tanks and armored personnel carriers to the front.
The defense forces of southern Ukraine struck the locomotive along with the column of enemy equipment. The enemy's losses amounted to 13 tanks and more than 100 units of armored and automotive equipment.
Officially, the armed forces of Ukraine have not yet disclosed how they managed to successfully strike the locomotive and more than 100 units of enemy equipment. However, information is circulating online, particularly in the so-called Z-swamp, that FPV drones were once again used by Ukraine in the special operation.
At some point, the hatches on the railway hopper grain cars started flying off while the train was moving. It was through these hatches that drones flew out and attacked the equipment that was placed on the flatbed cars. Whoever came up with the idea to combine a trainload of military equipment with grain cars is a mystery. It's also unknown how the SBU managed to hide drones in there, but the result was this. The first strike hit the locomotive, after which the train began to lose speed and was brought to a stop. The enemy then destroyed most of the equipment without any resistance.
Supporting the theory about FPV drones is the fact that several weeks earlier, the president of Ukraine mentioned the successful special operation involving the mass destruction of occupation equipment using hundreds of small drones.
Recently, we carried out an interesting strike against them. At the same time, we hit them with 400 small drones. More than 40 pieces of equipment were destroyed simultaneously. We took this step. It was carried out solely by the military only on the battlefield. This was an attempt at such an operation, and we will show them many times more than what this operation achieved.
It should also be noted that Ukraine is actively expanding the range and production of its own missiles, bombs and rocket drones. Just recently, it was reported that Ukrainian ballistic missiles were used in combat for the first time.
In mid-May, tests were conducted that are being described as extremely successful. The missile traveled almost 300 kilometers and destroyed a Russian command post. The warhead of this missile weighs over 400 kilograms, making it a very powerful weapon.
And precisely in the southern Kherson direction, the Ukrainian armed forces successfully tested a new experimental munition weighing more than 100 kilograms.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
No matter what was used to deliver this strike, one thing is clear. In response to the occupiers' plans to continue their offensive, destroy cities and seize new Ukrainian territories, Ukraine is intensifying its strikes on Russian rear positions and logistics. Military airfields, bridges, factories, ammunition depots and railway lines are being destroyed with unprecedented intensity and effectiveness.
The Ukrainian intelligence community is reducing the enemy's ability to redeploy personnel, deliver ammunition, evacuate the wounded, and as a result is decreasing the intensity of the Russian troops' advance. Blocking logistics makes it possible to A. reduce the rate of fire damage, B. affect the redeployment of personnel, and accordingly the formation of assault groups.
Such special operations are becoming Ukraine's most important tool in reducing the military potential of the Russian invaders.
And while politicians debate, Ukraine takes an action. On the night of June 14th, Ukrainian drones struck two major targets in Russia's military-industrial complex. The first, a leading facility producing explosive components. Massive blasts and fires were confirmed in the industrial zone. The second target, the Nevinnomysk chemical plant in Russia's Stavropol region. This facility is a key supplier of explosive ammunition and rocket fuel. And yes, it's been directly supporting Russia's war on Ukraine. That's what we call cutting off the fuel to the fire.
Guys, there's nitrogen burning over there and you could hear gunfire. You can hear shots being fired. And right now it's really scary. How can I put this? You can hear the sounds of gunfire over there. And that's nitrogen.
And now the grim milestone. Russia has officially lost over 1 million troops in this war. As for June 14th, the body count stands at 1,002,690. Just yesterday alone, 1,130 killed or wounded. How many more lives is the Kremlin ready to sacrifice for the Putin pride?
Russian losses in Ukraine have surpassed 1 million, a record high for the Kremlin in 80 years. Officially, Moscow has only acknowledged the casualties once, back in the fall of 2022. Strangely enough, Putin himself recently indirectly confirmed the massive losses in the army. He boasted to journalists that every month 50 to 60,000 people sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense.
Now, here's the most interesting part. Where do these people go? Forgive me, Lord, people, right? It's a one-way ticket. I've heard for a long time now that contracts are no longer terminated when they expire. They are officially automatically extended. 600, according to Putin, 600 to 720,000 a year, one way. This is not rotation. It's not like some go, come back, and others take their place. This isn't rotation. It's one way only. From this one-way trip, you either end up as a 200th in a body bag or on welfare with severe disability.
Any figures about the war in Ukraine have been classified by the Russian Federation. The project Media Zona keeps track of the 200s. At the moment, their list contains more than 111,000 dead. By name, even this number is far from accurate, but it still gives an idea of what's happening. The so-called volunteers are among the leaders in the number of casualties. The special military operation, as it is called in Russia, has become a ticket to a better life for thousands of Russians. They sign contracts simply because of the poverty in the country of the gas station. They are lured by million-ruble payouts offered by local and federal authorities.
The story of Stanislav Simonov from the small Bashkir town of Beloretsky is telling. It is similar to the path of thousands of other people. He was 51 years old. After finishing school, Stanislav studied at a vocational school to become a locksmith, worked at a metallurgical plant, and in November of last year signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. In November, and already by December 16th, that is literally a month later, he was killed. The story of Simonov is telling in that, firstly, nowadays it is increasingly managed 45 to 50 who are signing contracts. Most volunteers undergo training for only 1 or 2 weeks. And after that, they're sent straight to the front. And many of them had never served in the army before. Some had only completed their mandatory military service many, many years ago. Surviving the war in Ukraine with such training, or rather, with a lack of it, is extremely difficult.
The rather advanced age of Russian volunteers indicates that it is becoming harder for commanders to replenish their ranks with them. By the way, those who choose a contract over a courtroom bench are also considered volunteers. Convicts are another category that is being actively mobilized and used as expendables. The practice of recruiting them was started by the now deceased Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. Thanks to him, Russians significantly emptied out the prison cells. But even in the 4th year of the full-scale war, prisoners are still helping to maintain the numbers of the Russian forces in Ukraine. It's possible that they are now being sent to the front by decision of the prison administration. The advantage with them is that you can do whatever you want to them.
I'm already at the training ground. It was made very clear, if you go to fight, that's it. They didn't ask me, they just gathered us up. I even have artificial heart valves, which technically make me unfit for service. But that's what the administration wanted. They gathered us up and sent us off. I wasn't the only one like that. The attitude of the unit commanders, well, specifically when you're on a mission, how they treat you. The last thing I noticed was this. When we were in a group, just the two of us men, a veteran, got wounded when we were coming out of New York, on the pipes. He was wounded by a drone. The next day we explained, we reported that he was wounded. The next day we were handed over to another commander. Another commander got on the radio with us and said, "Get ready, we're leaving now." Well, we remind him that we have 300 veterans. That is, he needed help, he needed to be evacuated. The commander's call sign was Abkhaz, He specifically said, these were his words, "By Valley, if you come back, then I'll come in." Those were the commander's exact words. Then another commander with a different call sign switched in. I don't remember his name. He was yelling over the radio, "Forward, don't only forward." And I also noticed in the unit right away, they beat you with sticks, they beat you up, put you in a cage and beat you with sticks. I had a case like that too. That's how they punish guys who...
For the war in Ukraine, Russians are actively recruiting mercenaries from all over the world. This practice was also started by the Wagner PMC. In more than 3 years, all kinds of people have ended up in the Ukrainian trenches: Cubans, Indians, Chinese. Their discovery has provoked international scandals. From the post-Soviet countries, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Kyrgyz and Belarusians are actively fighting on Russia's side. There are also quite a few mercenaries from Serbia, Syria, Afghanistan and African countries. They are recruited under the pretext of job offers, with promises of high salaries and citizenship.
I understand, Russia, you are being killed. Right now, I want to go to Turkey. I don't want to go to Iraq, I just want to go home. Russia is bad. Bad. I feel very bad. I want to go home.
For thousands of poor people from all over the world, the battlefield in Ukraine has become an attempt to improve their financial situation. So far, neither videos showing piles of corpses nor the way Russians at the front discipline those unwilling to fight have stopped them. But this can't go on forever. Russia's human and financial resources are limited, unless partners from the axis of evil, like North Korea did, deliberately come to its aid. According to intelligence reports, their contingent was the largest.
And now, a familiar move. Russia sending troops into Belarus under the guise of a military exercise. Sounds familiar? That's exactly what they did before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Is this a threat to the new Ukrainian regions or the opening move in the war with the NATO? Looks like NATO is finally starting to see the dictator's true intentions.
NATO Secretary General Rutte stated Russia is planning to attack alliance countries within the next 5 years.
Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years. 5 years? Let's not fool ourselves. History has taught us that to preserve peace, we must prepare for war.
There are numerous factors and intelligence data indicating that Russia is indeed preparing for war with NATO.
The Russian Federation is increasing its military presence on the borders with Finland. This involves the construction of military bases, airfields, ammunition depots, and accordingly, an increase in the number of personnel directly near the borders with NATO countries.
Even though the Russians are spending a lot of resources on the war in Ukraine, they are producing several times more weapons than the NATO countries.
As for ammunition, Russia produces in 3 months as much as all of NATO produces in a year. It is expected that this year alone, its defense industry will produce 500 tanks, 3 zero-armored vehicles, and 200 Iskander missiles.
The Russian side itself admits that at the moment they are mainly using stockpiles of Soviet-era weapons. In other words, this is the very armored equipment that was kept in long-term storage depots. On the one hand, it's a demonstration of growing military capability, but on the other hand, it's actually a sign of the degradation of the Russian defense industry and its inability to reproduce the latest models of weaponry.
NATO is also concerned about Russian drone and missile strikes, following the example of what has happened in Ukraine.
We need to strengthen our air and missile defense by 400%. All of us are now on the eastern flank. The new generation of Russian missiles travels at speeds many times faster than the speed of sound. The distance between European capitals is just a matter of minutes.
In addition, according to the expert, if there is an attack, the Russians, as always, will rely on sheer numbers.
Apparently, the Russian Federation will focus primarily on tactics from the Second World War. This means an advantage in manpower. In other words, the well-known tactic, often referred to as Zhukov style, which the Ukrainian side knows as so-called meat assaults, or in the Russian interpretation, we won't spare the cost in lives. That is why the main advantage the Russian Federation has over NATO countries is its virtually unlimited mobilization reserve.
Rutte is concerned not only about Russia, but also about its allies Iran and North Korea, and most of all China, all of whom are also expanding their military capabilities.
China is also expanding its nuclear arsenal and intends to have more than 1,000 operational nuclear warheads by 2030. Those who oppose freedom and democracy are entrenching themselves, preparing for long-term confrontation.
Rutte openly stated that if the bloc countries do not start increasing defense spending and arming themselves, they should prepare for life under occupation.
If you don't agree to spend 5%, you might still have a healthcare system, a pension system, and so on, but you will have to learn to speak Russian. I was told, Mark, if you bring these harsh facts to the surface, it might be a shock for the public, but they should be on alert. This is our reality.
European states understand perfectly well. If Ukraine cannot withstand Russian attacks, the next target of the Russian occupiers will be NATO countries themselves, primarily Poland and the Baltic states. Moreover, the possibility of a direct armed intervention against Finland and Sweden is also being considered.
It seems that Europe has finally woken up, and European leaders have realized that it is impossible to negotiate with the aggressor. If they do not want to end up under Russian occupation, they will have to defend themselves.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching and standing with Ukraine. We read your comments and we feel your support. Strength to our defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. See you next time.